Well, let's take this again. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the GMG Indie Hour. We've got all the patrons here in the chat because we're doing a do-over because you guys didn't get to see what I was doing just now. And luckily somebody pointed it in the chat and I caught it, so we're just going to start from scratch. And you guys are going to listen to this all over again. We got all kinds of people in the chat right now, and we'll say hi to them real fast. But for those of you who've never been here before, the GMG Indie Hour is basically a 1 hour every week picked by the patrons examination of an indie game, paired by me as your gaming sommelier with what game I think deserves more hype that's kind of in the same vein, and that people might appreciate if they're a fan of what we're looking at. So today we are taking a look at Max FitzGerald's Turnip28. And this is a Patreon-based indie war game by a fantastic UK-based artist who is clearly into the grimdark landscape, right? What we have here is art in the vein of like John Blanche or Alex Boyd, those 90s and 2000s Games Workshop artists who now have a lot of them come to mentor him. I know John Blanche is a huge fan of Max's art and I think has been quite the mentor to him over the course of his career so far. We have a fully sort of like available for free playtest rulebook here on Max's Patreon, and he runs all this stuff through his Patreon. He is also a sculptor, so there are STLs available of his lovely miniatures, and you can see here he has a variety of really cool sculpts that you can look at, painted up by tons of his fans in the hashtag 28 community, and which are available as downloads when you are a paid member of his Patreon. So, what we have here really is a game by an artist looking to express themselves through their art and with extremely cool sort of like themes and vibes. If you like grimdark stuff, what Turnip28 is billed as is a squelchy war game. It's a war where after the defeat of Napoleon, the world just got weirder and darker, and weird roots take hold of the whole planet. And it becomes infested by tubers and darkness. And in order to survive, we start eating the things that are under the ground. It pushes up weapons and rusty war gear and causes us to fight each other. And it's a real body horror type of art style where we're slowly turning into the things that we're consuming and, you know, like becoming like a weird melting pot of root vegetables and monsters. Now, it does have a lot of humor. I mean, that sounds really gross and horror-y. But like most great Cronenberg-y stuff, there's cuteness and humor too. You can see this little fucking dildo who's one of Max's sculpts as well. He's just a weird little tuber guy. And there's everything from like Snail Cavalry in the miniature game to a variety of other sort of like kind of fun, different, weird, almost humorous sort of things. Like you can see the long noses and stuff on a lot of these XTLs are designed to look silly and have like a goofiness to them. And it just makes it, I think, more enjoyable. It's the lighthearted part of grimdark that I think makes it more palatable, makes it go down a little bit better for those people that like leaning into the darkness. Now, let's take a look at the core playtest rules. This is probably, if you have, you know, you're a kind of a, what's the word? A lover of indie rule sets. Turnip28 has maybe one of the most beautiful rule books because it's all illustrated by Max. And his, like, you know, taking the master's style and making it grim and dark. There's vibes, obviously, of John Blanche in here, but Hieronymus with Bosch. You know, you got a little bit of Brom in here with the color palette even on this. This is kind of a dark sun thing. But you can see the humor, even with, like, this big, long-nosed, weird, kind of, like, monstrous cardinal with its frilly collar. We got a little root down here handing it a sock for funds, right? Like it has whimsy to it, even though it's so gross. Now the rulebook itself is a 66-page, nice, simple, sort of like laid out, but full color with art, quick start version of the rules of the game. It provides 3 scenarios: the Long March, the Trouble in the Fog, and Crossing the Dredge, and a ton of cults. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 different cults. 15 different cults. 15 different cults with the Temple of Swellings at the end there. My favorite's Todds Folly because it's about a frog named Todd and the sons of Todd that might also fight against them. It's the one that tickled me the most. And the game is points free. It's based around how many leader types you have in the army. It's D6 based with a real simple stat line, and there's a lot of humor even like baked into the rules themselves. So you can see here, Turnip28 is the squelchy war game. It's gross. It's designed to be gross and fun and weird. Preparing for a battle, there are turnip miniatures. It has official Turnip28 miniatures. Players are encouraged to convert their own figures using whatever historical and fantasy kits they can lay their filthy hands on. A guide to kit bashing your first regiment can be found in issue 1 of The Swollen Maglet, which is his monthly magazine. If you have access to Tabletop Simulator, there's also Turnip28 mod that you can play right away. It's played on a flat surface between 3 and 4 feet square. The board generally consists of about 3 to 5 pieces of terrain, and it takes place in Sist, a mysterious and tussocked county obsessed with root vegetables. A more detailed look at the terrain in Sist will come later, but for now it's a good principle that at least 1 piece of terrain should be on every 2 feet square of board. Uses D6s. If you have 20 guys in your unit, maybe 20 will be needed, but you probably need less than that, maybe a dozen. You need panic tokens for when you start to freak out, powder tokens for when your unit of black powder weapons is fired, some objective markers, and some order tokens so you know who's gone and who hasn't. You can measure at any time, and you can also print and play the STLs that are on the Turnip28 Patreon. General principles and models, you should be on a between 20 and 30 mil base. Now, Max's design is to be an artist's game, so he's not super strict about base sizes. This is not that kind of a game if that's what you're looking for. And then unit coherency is equally simple. Stay within 1 inch of somebody else in your unit, and as long as the unit's no more than 8 inches across, then your unit is in coherency. You can also multi-base and just apply wounds to the multiple bases and reduce its attacks by 1 for every wound it has. Real simple stat block, movement 6. So how many inches in movement you move when you make a move order or add to your movement if you're doing like a run. You have attacks, how many times you attack in melee when you go to stab, your inaccuracy. So you can see the funniness and the humor in like the basic gameplay. Your dice roll to hit in melee or with shooting, how many wounds you can take before you're removed, and your vulnerability, which is what you need to roll or higher to shrug off damage. Now you'll see there's no like strength or toughness characteristics. Most attack sequences are just roll your pile of hits, make your pile of saves, remove models, and go back and forth doing that. Some other core mechanics like roll-offs and rerolls. How do you take that stuff into account? Like how do you roll off if you tie? And then targeting. You can always have to shoot the closest thing unless something overrides that because everyone's freaking out. The general vibe of the rules is your guys suck, right? They're based around who can be bullied onto the battlefield by the snobs and toffs of the game. And then, again, more beautiful art. I love this thing. Look at this big weirdo. This big, weird monster mouth. I don't know. It's supposed to be like it's like a thing. It's like the thing. It's like a thing Cronenberg with lots of Napoleonic medals. And so playing the game. So the actual like unit design is based around your snobs. And snobs come in 2 classes. The toff, who's the boss is in charge, and the toadies, who are the people that he's basically bullied into also leading the army. And your game size is based upon, you have 1 toff all the time. He's in charge of your army, he's your general. He gets 2 units of followers that come with him. Every time you take a toady and you agree upon how many toadies you're taking, that's your point value to play against somebody, your toady also unlocks another unit of followers. Now, when you go to your activation sequence, it's going to matter how many toffs and toadies you have because their order range is bigger or smaller based upon if they're the general or not. And every time they order someone to go, they go before the remaining followers. So you're kind of getting the jump on people with your command units, and your follower units will then the remaining ones will all activate at the end. So managing your toffs and your toadies is basically how you're going to control the flow of the battlefield. Game's always 4 rounds. You roll off for initiative. That's the person that goes first every round, and they just maintain it for the game, but they also have to deploy first. And you can't come within an inch of somebody when you're playing. Now, order sequence. This is what I was talking about earlier. Starting with the player that has the initiative, pick a friendly snob under your control to make ready, and then they can issue an order to some other follower inside their command range. Command range for snobs or toffs is going to be 6 and toadies is 3. Pick an order. There's 4 core orders. It's basically charge, run, march, shoot, and then volley fire, move and shoot, march, and charge. So stand still and shoot, where you get an accuracy bonus. Move and shoot, where you get to move and still fire afterwards. March, which is you don't make any shooting actions, you just make a longer distance move, and then charge. Every time you do one of these things, though, you got to roll for a blunder. And if you roll a blunder, you get a reduced version of the order. So if you roll a 1 on a d6, for instance, on volley fire, you still shoot, but you don't get the -1 to your inaccuracy, so you don't improve your stat to shoot. Move and shoot. Normally you would move your full movement distance and enter a shooting engagement with a target unit that's also in range. But if you blunder, you only move d6 before entering the engagement, so you don't move as far. Every time you roll a blunder, you get a panic token, and panic tokens can keep you from activating or even make you freak out and run away when someone attacks you later on. Once all the officers have activated, then the leftover followers can activate, also picking orders and doing things. So the idea there is your officers are allowing to kind of like trump how fast people go and push units into the fight. Now they can also activate on their own and do things by themselves, but they're just one guy. They can't influence the battlefield that much. Movement, pretty simple. Basic Warhammer movement, stay in coherency while you move, measure each model. Shooting engagements. Now, shooting engagement is a lot like a melee, but because a lot of the weapons are black powder, basically you fire at each other at super short range, and the side that takes the most casualties is the one that's going to fall back and run away. You can keep shooting if you don't have black powder weapons, but most of the weapons are black powder in this game, so you can't actually go more than one round. It does make shooting pretty decisive, though, and it allows you to drive back things off objectives and take control of the battlefield. Melee is even more decisive. When you fight in melee, you fight until one side's dead or runs away. So if you keep tying over and over again, you charge into combat, you make your melee sequence and make your attacks, and you use the attack stat in this case rather than shooting. Shooting is always one dice. You roll, make your inaccuracy test. Every hit is a hit. Make your vulnerability saves on the other side. Every failed save is a wound that you take. The side that takes the most wounds is the one that has to be driven back. And you go back and forth between the two units. In melee, it's the same thing, except you're using your attack dice. So if you're using that basic stat block we saw where you get 2 attacks, every model's rolling 2 dice, making that hit, and then you're making those saves. And it's only the survivors that strike back that get to actually do damage. But if you tie, you just keep fighting until either you're dead or somebody runs back because they took more wounds than the other person. Panic tokens. So when you have cults, there can be like special ways of removing your panic, but mostly just accrue panic over the course of the game because you're all cowardly, weird root vegetable people, which means that, you know, you're not necessarily the best at staying on the battlefield. So you take panic tokens if you get hit by a shooting attack, if you fight in melee, if you fail a dangerous terrain test, or if you blunder your orders. When our units charge, it will need to make a panic test to see if it will still have the will to fight. A unit that fails a panic test retreats immediately. So if someone attacks you while you have panic tokens, you start to run away. Every time you roll a panic test, you roll d6. You add your number of panic tokens. If it's greater than 6, basically, then you're going to have to fall back. And then you can get run down and die when you make a retreat order. And from there, we're into terrain. So basic rules for like what's cover, you know, what kind of terrain do you have? Is it difficult? Is it dangerous? And then we got our scenarios. And the scenarios are very thematic. So for instance, in this one, the Long March, you're trying to take a central building here. There's 5 objective markers. At the end of 4 rounds, and you can see the layout for this is very Mordheim from the way that even like the table's drawn and we have our objective markers. Even the text here is laid out very Mordheimy. So the board size is 48 by 48. Players take turn placing a piece of dangerous terrain until there's 3 pieces on the table. They must be placed in each other's deployment zones and not within 8 of each other. So they must be placed within each player's deployment zone and must not be within each other. The player with the initiative places a piece of defensible terrain somewhere along the center line and then take turns placing a piece of cover each anywhere on the board. If you control more objectives at the end of turn 4, you win. Or if you headless chicken, lose all your snobs, you lose. And then scenario blunder, whenever you roll a 1 when doing an order, you get the full version of your order. You don't reduce your order to like the blunder level. And you eat D3 models in your unit because your guys are all cannibals. And everyone looks delicious because they're made out of turnips. But you still get the panic token for doing so. We got the trouble in the fog. 2 opposing columns stretch out in the march, barely meters away from each other, and you just bundle into each other, basically. And then the last of the free scenarios is Crossing the Dredge. A soggy stretch of treacherous swampland lies in front of the regiments. An ancient rotten bridge is the only thing that provides a sure path, and you got to fight across it. And again, what a beautifully illustrated rulebook. This crazy fish man puppet thing in the cult. And then we got building our regiments. So like I said earlier, the core component is your TOF. The number of toadies you get on top of that will dictate how many follower units you get. And this is the core list that everyone has access to. Now, the 14, 15 cults that you have access to will give you different types of units to add in. And to play a cult, you have to have at least 1 follower unit or thing from that cult to unlock its special rules. But if you just want to play to the core rules without choosing a cult, you can just use these. So snobs and toadies have their own core stat lines. The command range of the Toff obviously is 6. He's about the same as everybody else. He's got a 5+ inaccuracy and a 5+ vulnerability, but he's got 2 wounds. And then a basic toady is exactly the same as his friends, except he's got 1 wound too. And you've got some special rules for the Toff though. Toff off. Whenever a Toff you control is made ready within 18 line of sight of an enemy Toff, you may propose a Toff off. A Toff off is a relatively honorable duel to the death where only 1 Toff is left standing. When a player is challenged to a Toff off, they must accept. Sabers for tea. To fight a Toff off, both Toffs simultaneously make melee attacks against each other until 1 Toff has perished. And when one of the other Toffs expires, the Toff off ends. If your Toff is alive, proceed to your Toff's orders. If not, the Toff ends. And then nice spot for a picnic. Players are encouraged to pick a suitably grandiose spot in the battlefield to host their Toff off. Mark the Toff's original positions and place them in the area ready for a duel. Once one or both Toffs has gone to nibble on that great turnip in the sky, proceed to return the victor to their original position and proceed with their order. So as like an out of activation thing, you can just try and assassinate your enemy's general. And then followers, they're just based on class. You got fodder, chaff, and brutes. So fodder this is a little bit like Saga, where you just reduce, because it's points free, the better something is, the less guys you get. So chaff, you get 4 models. Fodder, you get 12 models. Brute, you get 6 models. And they have different sort of weapon classes. So fodders are safety numbers. If the unit contains 8 or more models, it's fearless. Brutes are automatically fearless. Each time a unit with fearless is required to retreat, including after failing a panic test. On a 3+, they just don't. If a unit with fearless loses a melee but passes its fearless roll, it's only moved back an inch if possible, and this does not count as a move or a retreat. And then chaff, they have sharpshooters. When a unit shooting or charging, this unit can target any enemy, not just the closest. Vanguard, after deployment, starting with the player with the initiative, players take turns moving their Vanguard unit up to their movement, and then a deployed snob does not move if their units are Vanguard. Vanguards happen after the preliminary bombardment, if someone's got a stump gun. And they also skirmish. When this unit's targeted by a shooting attack, increase the inaccuracy of the shooter by 2 for that attack, because they don't stick together that far. We got cavalry, whelps, and bastards. They're basically, 2 different sizes of cavalry. So for whelps, it's little guys. You get 4 models. They got 18-inch weapon ranges, 2 attacks and 2 wounds. So they're a bit tougher than everybody else, but their vulnerability is only a 6+. And they have dash. This unit may make a move up to its movement characteristic after it's completed its order. So basically they can move, shoot, move again, potentially. And then snobs cannot be moved alongside this unit after their dash because they don't have the same cavalry. So it's like your light cavalry, basically. And then bastards, the illegitimate offspring of the countless toadies who travel through the marsh, eager to prove their worth to their uncaring parents, they thoughtlessly hurtle themselves in the most gruesome combats on their frothing steeds. They've got the higher vulnerability and 4 attacks. And they've got a bowel loosening charge. When a unit with this rule charges, their target must reroll any successful panic tests. And then finally, you can take a stump gun. It's like a cool artillery piece, and it has a preliminary bombardment it can do, and fire different kinds of rounds like grape shot and round shot. And it's got 3 wounds, a 5+ vulnerability, 6+ inaccuracy, and 3 attacks in melee, because there's usually 3 guys on the model. They're stubborn fanatics. The crew love their stump gun like their grumpy child, and they will never abandon it. The stump gun cannot be moved. It cannot charge, march, move, and shoot. It will never retreat under any circumstance. If it loses a melee, it moves 1 inch backwards if possible. This is not a move or a retreat. Then you can fire at the start of the game. So your cavalry is basically stuck there for the entire game, wherever you put it. I love this little toad in the liner notes here. And we got our cults. They're the weird regiments of the marsh. I'm just going to focus on one. There's 15 in here, and you guys can, again, grab this rules for free and look through if you want. They all have a theme. So Strangle and Harry's Wretched Recruits, for instance, they're kind of maggoty. And there's 3 sections in here. There's the actual core of what they are, their methods. Each time you control successfully completes one of these actions, they immediately remove up to 3 panic tokens. This is how you get rid of your panic. Stick 'em, you animals. Charge an enemy unit with a powder smoke token. Now, you idiots, volley and enter a shooting engagement with an enemy with a powder smoke token, or kill him in the mud. Force an enemy unit to take a dangerous terrain test when it retreats. And finally, it's just sitting there, capture an objective. You get Harry's Training Bucket. You may take 1 unit of Rootlings as one of your followers. These are 6 models. Now, there's a bucket of freshly throttled Rootlings to look after. If you think you can, keep the bloody things alive and stick them to the enemy. Then maybe, just maybe, I'll introduce you to the rest of the cults. So they're just weird little dudes that live in a bucket, 7+ vitality and 7+ inaccuracy. They're considered to be equipped with a close combat weapon. And uproot, when this unit's killed at the start of the next round, place this unit within a piece of dangerous terrain, not within one of any other unit. This unit may not capture an objective the round it arrives back on the board. So basically, you just keep coming back to life because they just go back down to the mud and come back out of the roots. And then how they play, dealing with Harry, strangling Harry's wretched recruits, rewards and teaches players good turn-up fundamentals. Focusing on Harry's methods will keep your rabble alive. And this is just like some Q&A stuff on how to use their special rules. We got slug-based ones. We got Todds Folly. I love this one because it replaces your Toff with Todd. Todd was once a dashing cavalry officer that started licking toads and then turned into a toad. And one of his special rules is, son of Todd. If there are 2 or more Todds in the field, then players roll off to see which one's Todd and which one's the bastard illegitimate son of Todd. It has no in-game effect. You just know who's the real Todd, basically. And then Todd off. If Todd's killed during a Toff off, instead he miraculously survives and the enemy Toff dies. So if he dies, then the other guy dies instead. It's so funny. Just an automatic one. And he's your special unit. You have Todd. Rod, Todd, this is God. We have the Fungranous Herd. So it's like a weird, like pig-based, growing with weird fungi. We've got the Grand Bombard with a giant gun. The Brotherhood of Greed with their weird mutations. There's some additional rules for that. Again, beautiful. Look at this thing. Look at this. Look at this piece of art. I have to say, this is maybe my favorite piece of art in this book. And it's because it reminds me of the old Empire of Man cover from Warhammer Fantasy Battle, except just weird and fucking overgrown. It's got that same sort of like, I think it was 7th edition Empire cover. The Red Ribbon Society. The Feast of Charybdis with like weird crab people. You can South Park it up with crab people. The Knights of Shellwood, where if you get your snails, you get giant snail cavalry. The Snail Knight, 1 model. He's a single dude. When building a regiment, you may take up to 2 units of Snail Knights as followers, but it's a single model per unit. They've got 4 wounds and a 3+ vulnerability check with a 5+ in accuracy and 6 attacks in melee. They're always considered to be in defensible terrain. They have snail gunners. If this unit's equipped with black powder weapons, its single shooting attack causes 2 wounds if it hits. These cannot be prevented by vulnerability rolls. That's crazy. They can do a mucus maneuver, which is like a power slide. And then Snail's Pace. Every unit in this regiment counts as having a movement of 0. Hardboiled. If a unit from this regiment has not moved this round, they count as being wholly within defensible terrain and have -1 vulnerability. Holy moly. So if you do the mucus maneuver, then basically all friendly Snail Knights and cavalry fighters increase their movement by 46 until the end of the round. So you can slide on the mucus, otherwise you move 0 when you move. And then we get the Lopers of the Maudlin Marsh. They're like little dudes on stilts. So your Lopers are a follower unit with 4 models. They have a movement of 12, 3 attacks, inaccuracy 5+, 2 wounds, and a 6+ of their vulnerability. Dudes in I like this one. Just because, you need a Zeppelin, an observation balloon with little guns shooting out of it. The Leech Lovers, they just love leeches. Oh my God, that piece of art with the dude, the weird leech nose man. Lovers at court, they make such a handsome couple. When building your regiment, you must take the Leech Lovers instead of your Toff, so you get this special one. Oh sweetness, oh darling. Oh, it's so gross. Their special is Lover's Kiss. Whenever a friendly model within 6 of the Leech Lovers heals a wound, you may add 1 parasite token to any followers on the board. And you get to use parasite tokens. At the start of each round, each unit with a parasite token loses a wound. Abilities to remove panic tokens cause the unit with the panic token to suffer a wound for every 2 tokens that are removed. The unit may attempt to prevent this wound with the vulnerability roll. So basically you give the bad guys these parasite tokens. The Uprising of the Louse. Oh, it's the Wicker Man. How cool is that? The Tall Man. And Saint Alamai's rocket battery. It's the whatchamacallit, the Roman candles super rocket. The Temple of Dwellings, and that's it. So let's check back in with the chat and see how they're doing. Obviously, this was a huge endeavor for Max to make, and he's been doing this for I think close to 10 years. Because I think as long as I've been doing GMG, I can remember Max making art. I'm not sure how long his game's been going, but he has absolutely been doing a huge push recently to make his own miniatures and sort of like fully develop this game. And you can check this out at his Patreon right now. Sign up for free and check out the rulebook. It's super cool. And obviously you can convert your own miniatures, or you can make, your own sort of like interpretation of this with his models and just your own paint schemes and stuff too. So tons of accessibility to get into this game. Not a huge high model count, about the same as a Saga army. And a very, cool, fun, artistic mechanic, and well worth checking out. So that was our patron pick for this week. Let's take a look at our paired pick. Now, this is a game that's been around, Jesus, as long as there's been an internet with miniature war games on it, I think. Zombie Smith's been around. As long as I've been in indie games, I can't think of a time there hasn't been a Zombie Smith. And there hasn't been a THIS QUAR'S WAR. THIS QUAR'S WAR is the game of sentient, weird insect anteaters fighting their own version of World War I in an alternate reality. You can go to Zombie Smith and get their primer and their quick start rules for free today. And you can go to Wargames Atlantic and get all their cool new plastic miniatures. The QUAR'S WAR Clash Revivals box set is a 2-player box set that gives you the rules and all the stuff you need to play. You can also grab Crusader squads and a variety of plastics now. So like the trench raiders, and they're just adorable. They have the same sort of grim, dark aesthetic that the Turnip28 guys had. And so I thought this was a perfect pairing, and even scale wise, the game is very similar. So that's my pairing for this week. We have THIS QUAR'S WAR by Anthony Brown and Josh Cultieri. Sorry, pronounced that wrong. And so let's take a look at the rule book. This is the Rifler's Pocketbook. Now, this comes in the same 2-player starter set that I just showed you, THIS QUAR'S WAR Clash of Rifles from Wargames Atlantic. So if you're looking for this box set, that you're going to get a same print version of that rulebook. You can see here the Rifler's Pocketbook in here, and you can check it out right now. So that's the actual box set. You can see it comes with hard plastic miniatures, D6s, and your activation deck. You do need that activation deck or to make your own to be able to play the game, and enough for you to make 2 squads of guys and fight your little core war. 10 little core here to fight with. So I thought we'd take a look at the rulebook today and compare them. This is a... Imagine the Quar as being like weird hobbits. They love home life. They love being at home. They love a simpler time and not being bothered by anybody. And this is Alwood, which means home. But basically the Crusade has sent the two sort of like counties against each other for as long as anyone can remember. And you've got two sort of like factions on the continent and their various sort of supporting sub-factions on top of that. It's kind of a War of the Roses parable, but set in like a slightly more modern era. And this free rulebook this free background book from Zombie Smith will give you everything you need to know about the Quar. They're about 1.5 meters tall. They weigh about 63 kilograms. They're bipedal synapsids, and they're insectivore and facultative omnivores. So if you want to know about the Long War and the Crusade, you can get all the background over here, but we're going to take a look at the pocketbook and the core rules for the game. So core concepts, you get your attributes. They're pretty simple. You don't have a ton of them. You've got your skill, which is what you have to roll to hit, equal to or under. So it's roughly 11 to 12 is like a standard skill value. Every skill check in the game is 3d6 trying to roll under, plus or minus your modifiers. You get your toughness and your might. These are your melee values. Your might is how much damage you do in melee. It's typically a random value. And then your toughness is how much damage you take. If you get hit with a bullet in this, with a shooting attack, you're just dead. If you get hit in melee, how you are, based upon the value of what you roll, you're just dead. So, and melee, it's a lot harder to take someone out. You have to roll your might roll. And then if it's under their toughness, it's kind of has no effect. If it's more than their toughness, they might be gobsmacked. If it's double their toughness, they're taken out of action. And if you roll triple ones, you're just dead because triple ones is a critical hit. Then you get your point values. You play about a 300-point game to build your squads. You get your statuses. Are you ready? Are you engaged? Which means you're in base-to-base combat with somebody. Are you on Overwatch? Which means you can interrupt to shoot. Are you gobsmacked? Which means you're knocked down. Are you prone? Which means you're not not stunned. You're just laying down basically for cover, or you're out of action. Out of action means you're still on the table, but no one's checked on you to see if you're KIA'd or not. Dice rolls and skill checks. You're basically standard stuff here for D6s, and skill checks, like I said, are a 3D6, trying to get extremely low and extremely high results. Low are the best. High is like a blunder. And then you get your pluck. Pluck is kind of like Lord of the Rings style might. And this game is played with you being able to up or down things with pluck. So increasing a rifler's skill by 1 to change a failure to a success, you can use pluck for. You can increase a rifler's might roll by 1 by using pluck. Using a point of pluck to move a rifler an inch without spending an action, or making a charge attack. Putting an enemy in action gives you +1 pluck to your pluck pool. It's a shared pool by all models in your squad. Tending to a wounded, roll of 1 or 2, you get +1 pluck. Performing a steady action, you can buy pluck basically by like just sitting and waiting and burning actions. And then the leader performs a regroup action, you get +3 to 5 pluck when you do so. It's a D3 +2. And then the other core concepts are pretty standard, measuring between base to bases, line of sights, model's eye view. Terrain can be either clear, difficult, or impassable for your movements. And then your activation deck is what you get in that box set there. And it's used to see who's going to activate. It's a little bit like using the old activation deck for confrontation, where you'd flip to see what your unit is going to be doing and who's doing it. You have random outcome tables. So if you have to do something in a scenario, you'll use this table. Each dice result of 6 in a roll is very positive. Each result of 6, and the others are 2 to 5 positive. And then each dice results of 1, very negative, all the way down to the bottom. The game's played on a small table, so 2x2 is standard. For larger games, a 3x3, because it's just a squad against a squad, and it is model by model activation. I think the starter set's about a 200-point game. 300 points is ideal, and 400 to 500 points would be for like including some of the crazy units, because if you go and look on the Zombie Smith website, you can see they've got everything from like weird infantry guys to also things like tanks. And the tanks are extremely cool, like these weird ass Crusader Baylog tractors. I like the girl Quar painted on it. Makes me so happy. They have a weird kind of World War I vibe and are super fun. This one's very Doctor Who, this like weird rounded tank. They're extremely cute. But that's, if you understand that, you understand the general vibe of what we're looking at here with the Quar. And then activation is back and forth model by model to see who's activating. And you have a 2 action allowance, with the action list basically having various costs. So a move is 1 action, a sprint can be, you can only do each one of these once. A move costs you an action point. You move your like movement, and if you get into base to base, you're engaged. Sprint would allow you to do something on top of a move, so it's an additional move. Disengage would be like a fallback check. And then range attacks, when you do a range attack, it costs you 1 action point. If the target's not gobsmacked, then the target's commander immediately declares whether the target will be diving for cover or using a reaction shot. Gobsmacked riflers may not react fire. The action is chosen before the attack's resolved, but takes place after the attack. The attack makes a skill check, so you're going to roll your 3d6 and compare it to your skill. Let's say it's 12. -1 if it's a reaction shot, -4 if the target dives for cover, -1 for each full range band between the shooter and the target, and those range bands are between 4 and like 36 in sets. It's right in 48 in sets of 4. If the target has cover, is behind half behind an object, you're going to be -2, -3 if the target's in heavy cover, and +2 for a fully automatic weapon firing at a single target. And then the result is basically quality of success. So if the attacker rolls triple ones, the target's out of action. If the attacker rolls 4 or less, the target's out of action regardless of the number needed. If it's 3 or less, you get a free action point on top of that. 4 or less, you're just out of action. If the target succeeds at the skill check, the target's out of action. If the attacker fails the skill check but rolls less than 13 and the target chose dive for cover, they become gobsmacked. If the attack roll is 13 or more and the target chose dive for cover, the target's commander will move the rifler to cover. If it's 17 or more, the attacker is gobsmacked. If it's 18, the attacker's out of action because your gun blows up in your hand. And then reaction shots are conducted after the original attack happens. You can do supporting fire for pluck, which means that you can get plus to your skill. Aimed shot for 2. The rifle armed with a ranged weapon may spend 2 actions to perform a ranged attack without incurring any penalties for distance. If the commander does not have 2 actions available, the attack fails. And then Overwatch puts you on Overwatch status. It means you can shoot someone later on when they come back. Rules for grenades, fragmentation grenades, smoke grenades, charge actions, special abilities. These are all of your like tags and keywords you might have. Like if you're a Deadeye, the rifler is extraordinary skilled at shooting. They can perform an aim shot. They also increase it by X. So like you don't just ignore the range penalties, your skill also goes up when you do that. Are hardened, you're not gobsmacked when you dive for cover. Hero, a veteran of many battles. Heroes are difficult to put at disadvantage. They have the hardened and veteran special rules. A patrol can include one hero for every 100 points gathered to a maximum of the 4 allowed. Infiltrate, medic, allows you to 10 wounded if someone's injured in the battlefield. Wallop, a rifler with this ability, is trained in the art of melee weapons, and he is naturally very strong, allowing him to attack with great might. A rifler with a wallop ability may perform a powerful blow by spending a point of pluck instead of the second action normally required. And then we got some background for the scenarios. So the Mere Breach Offensive gives us our sort of like our like war line here. The Mere Breach, the Crusaders are on this side and the Royalists are on this side. It's around the town of Gearn and the Will. And our army list. The Crusader Army is a legendary for its military success, much for which it's a high degree of standardization. These are basically the parliamentarians in the War of the Roses. And you can see here our core stat line. So there's skill, like I said, 12 for most people. Yawdril is 13, who's armed with a bogan. The Is-Katarn is 12 as well. Your might is your melee damage, your move allowance, how many inches you can move, so 5 normally, toughness is 4. So for instance, if someone hit your rifler in melee with a Rishi, he'd roll 2d6 minus 1, and if it was less than their toughness, right, they're not injured. If it's more, they're gobsmacked. If it's double or more, they're out of action. So 2d6 minus 1, if you're rolling a hard 9, basically, you take that guy out of action. Rishi is all your melee weapons. So like your H11A is your automatic rifle. Your Grifkus shotgun is a shotgun with, and then you got your ranges here, which is your optimal range. And then every range band outside that range is going to be long range for these guns. So you've also got bracket numbers next to the points over here. So that's how many you can take per 300 points. So you only have one each of the specialists per 300 points. You can have 2 sharpshooters and a single LMG, and then as many riflers as you want. And there's your basic sort of like Crusader squad outline. And some color stuff, description of all their weapons. You get some background for this too. It's pretty comprehensive. And then your Koff tier, which is your other Crusader army over here. You get stat lines for them. Color schemes for them. And then some rules for your different skirmishes to play through. So how many turns it should be based on the point limits, a meeting engagement, all your setup and stuff like that. You're going to ambush, you're going to defend, seize the prize. So 4 different missions to play. And then tails are your campaign rules. Characters are 1 leader represents your commander for every 100 points of force. And the action basically is around them. You get experience rules for this. I love that the quick start rules come full on with like, did you die? Can you earn experience? And then some quick ref at the end there. So a very fun, like silly, and old, like this is a classic miniature game. This has been around for at least 20 years. And now fully in plastic from Wargames Atlantic. I love the fact that this got its own box set. Wargames Atlantic's really killing it recently in the indie sphere for just making things a reality for these indie games in a way that hasn't been done yet. Nobody's done this. Frostgrave even had to outsource all this to North Star, right? Like Wargames Atlantic is just, they're kind of like a North American version, I think, of what Osprey was doing, but including miniatures too and box sets. I'm super excited for these guys because I love what they're doing. And our last 2 indie hours, I've basically been able to pick out games that paired really well with these beautiful 3D printing communities, and have something in hard plastic. So again, if you're looking at something like Turnip28, you can absolutely play Turnip28 with these Quar from Wargames Atlantic. They're perfect for converting out of, mix in some, cause like they literally look like root vegetables. I might play Turnip28 with these. And what I see here is I see an on-ramp 2 more indie games through each other. So if you're coming to this kind of a game from the Games Workshop sphere and you're expecting to work with hard plastic, you're going to find something like Turnip28 more accessible using things like the Wargames Atlantic miniatures than if you're not a 3D printer. right? So I think the cross-pollination here is really good. And I think these paired really nicely. So let's go to the chat and see how everybody's doing. And yeah, and get some comments before we wrap this up, because we are just about done. So how is everybody doing in the chat? Who we got here? We got Ryan Dunphy here. Gary Lee's here. It's All Fun and Games here. Space Gamers here. Chris Banks is here. And Cheeses is here. Chris T-Bird's here. Kevin Mitchell's here. Captain Fairlight and Jez Hunt are here. Jez Hunt says mud and root antlers, and anteaters. That's 3 of the major food groups. Jez commenting on the art style too, says very Bruegel too. I love that kind of whimsical and grim or grimsicle mix of turnip. Grimsicle's that's a great way of describing that. So maybe that can be stolen for later. I think grimsicle is a great way of describing that. It's All Fun and Games. It's like the anteaters take over from us, basically. Yeah, you could put this Quars War as like a post-apocalyptic Earth game where the anteaters have basically evolved to the point now where they take over society, and like, sort of inherit the Earth from us. What was that? There was a movie like that. It was called like 17 or something like that. 13. It was about weird little dolls, little puppets that someone had made that were all AIs that were living in like the ruins of civilization. I can't remember what it was called, but it had that. It was one of those it had like small world animation, but it was very neat and fun and worth watching. Kudos Buddha's here. And Treadhead's Workshop's here. Not for a 3rd restart today. Yeah. Hey, sometimes things don't happen. And she says, I'm a big fan of fixed unit size. It makes everything easier. That is one of the fun, easy things I think about, a points-free system is you're not tinkering and you're not sweating. Did I take a big enough unit, small enough unit type? And it kind of, I think Turnip28 has that a guy is a guy is a guy infinity thing where if you understand what the core followers are, Saga has this too, where some of the formations have specialist units. You can build a core force for the game. And you can do this in Saga too with like Levy and Huskarls and your basic guys. And then you could play a bunch of different armies off that miniature collection just by having new accessory units basically that go into it. I think that's a really cool way of making an indie game because you kind of, you widen the on-ramp. I don't have to make a whole new army every time. Some people will, obviously, just for like thematic and painting purposes. But if you just paint like the core sort of like rifle guy in Turnip28, you can use it in all the cults, and then you just get to go and make fun, cool Snail Knights or cult troops or whatever, and have new Toffs basically to lead it and take over. And it's really clever game design, which just I think is even more impressive from a guy like Max, who's an artist. He's a multi-denominational talent, right? He's got some really clever stuff in his game design too that I think makes it stand out, and is why people have been so excited about it. And she says, I didn't realize Turnip28 was a full rule system. I thought it was just a vibe. Seems to have a nice balance of simplicity and interesting mechanics. It does a good job of getting like the basics of like that Napoleonic warfare thing, like the two sides volleying at each other, gaining a smoke token, and then one side driving back without being weighed down in rules. I also think that it does a really good job of mixing feeling with rules, like having the Toffs and Toadies mechanic where they get to order boss people around or do duels and stuff like that is very thematically cool, but it doesn't interfere really with like the gameplay overall. Yeah, it's just super clever. Same with the way that Quars War is a smaller skirmish, like the model count's lower. But because its value of success in a single dice roll, you're not spending too long working out multiple dice rolls to see what happens. It's one dice roll, put all your modifiers into it, and then see what the status of the target is when it's done. And it becomes about maneuvering and balancing activations against each other. And she says, yeah, had me at Snail Knights. Cell 3205 is here. He says, I love how this game makes me have random moments of inspiration, lets me realize them on the table. Just add a new centerpiece or unit and they get a whole new cult. Yeah, exactly. And she says, Quar War is the game for people who hate painting faces. You're not wrong. Kevin says, I came, I quar, I conquered. And I think that's it. It was 9. Yes, the movie I was thinking of was called 9. I think that's funny. Jesson says, beware of the soup dragon. And these would be great for Xenos Rampant too. Yeah, I think Xenos Rampant, the core miniatures you could use them for sci-fi, for fantasy, for just about anything. So we are done. Dan Fogg asks, can Core finally be a 40k killer? Can it unite all miniature gamers? Is it in fact the best game ever? No, but it looks super neat. That's a great way of putting it. I think that's what we're going to get from all of these games. And to wrap this up, I think this was a great example of how there's kind of a game out there for everybody, and a lot of what makes indie games, I think, fun is you can revitalize a miniature collection for yourself into a new experience, right? Like you could take those miniatures from QUAR'S WAR and definitely play Turnip28 with them. Last War, Trench Crusade, right? Like you can have a single collection with a vibe and then get a cool new rule set to take it into and then add bits and pieces to it to make it better. I kind of learned this when I wrote Last Days, because you can have a collection of modern zombie miniatures and zombie survivors and play 1,000 games with them. I will never run out of zombies or zombie survivor shit, because I've painted hundreds of those miniatures since I started my sort of like indie journey in 2009, 2008. So there it is. I think you guys have a Warhammer 40,000. Jesson says, I hope you guys have a great day. We are done another one of these. And next week's, so the poll will go up for next week's episode of this. And you guys will get a chance to vote on what you guys want to have. So remember, if you are a patron and you're watching this right now, go down to the comments of this episode on Patreon and make new suggestions. You get more interesting things added to the poll. I picked 20 things. I try and add in new ones. We get more interesting stuff the wider a net we cast, and you guys have all been, you guys collectively, I think there's 1,200 of us. I think there's only 500 or something patrons right now. I'd like that number to go up. That's rookie numbers. Let's get that number to go up. But you guys, we cast such a wide net. We're going to be able to find things that I individually can't. I think that's the point of this show, right? Is you guys lead a little bit of what we have happen going forward. So have a great rest of your week. If you're watching this in the future on Wednesday, Christmas Day, this comes out. Oh my God. Okay. If you're watching this on the 25th of December, then I hope everyone's having a fantastic day. You can go sign up for the Patreon if you'd like, and get your vote in or watch Christmas Day. I don't know if I'll do this Christmas Day next week. Probably not. I'll probably do it the day after, maybe Boxing Day, or maybe the day before on the Tuesday. We have a live episode. Yeah, I'll do this on Tuesday next week. Yeah, we'll do this on Tuesday next week. We'll have a live episode. It will have already aired, basically. And we'll have a live episode of the Patron show on Monday as well. So lots packed into Monday and Tuesday next week. But until then, have a great week. Get your votes in. Pick us a new great game. I'll pair it with something very cool. And I'll see you for more Indie Hour. Bye, everybody.